Hello everyone, welcome back to Big Jim's Bike Shop. I'm Big Jim, your local Midwestern bike mechanic. Today we're going to talk about motorcycle parts, but in particular we're going to talk about spark plugs. Now, spark plugs are one of those parts on a vehicle that everyone's heard about. We all know that your vehicle needs spark plugs. However, none of us really think more about spark plugs than going down to the local parts store, getting told they don't have your particular spark plugs in stock, and then having to go home and wait for 2 weeks as they get delivered from Amazon. So, while you're sitting there waiting for your plugs to arrive, and praying that the ones you ordered actually work, let's talk about them. Depending on how long you want to Google, the first spark plugs were invented about 1860 when the frog Jean-Joseph, it's something I can't pronounce, came up with the first real commercial combustion motor. Or, if you're a Firefox user, they were invented by the Kraut Robert Bosch in 1901 when he got his patent. But the very basic function of a spark plug, no matter who's taking credit for it, is to ignite your air-fuel mixture to get your bike up and down the road. Now, this controlled burn is very essential to get your piston moving, thus get your motor running. Now, I probably should have done a video about how a 4-stroke engine works first, but I didn't think of that, so here we are. In the modern world, a spark plug quite literally needs thousands of volts to start this controlled burn process. As you can see in my nice little diagram here, volts come in the top terminal, and at the bottom you can see the little lightning bolt where the burn process begins. Your bike will need a varying degree of volts and different spark plugs depending on the manufacturer requirements. But the good news is, there are a lot of guys out there a lot smarter than me that are figuring all this out. So read your manual, follow your specs, you'll be okay. Just looking at your spark plug, you can tell we have quite the blend of materials that go into this little thing. Most spark plugs today have a ceramic body, a copper core, various metals for the little electrode here at the bottom, and various metals for the thread and body. The reason for the different styles and materials is just based on the engineering design. The good news is that the engineers will design spark plugs and require spark plugs based on engine requirements. Just change the stupid spark plugs when the eggheads tell you to. A big question always asked when it comes to spark plugs is what do the little numbers and letters mean on the side of the plug? Well, those are put on by the manufacturer to tell you a variety of information about the plug. Now, do we have a universal system of letters and numbers and meanings across all manufacturers? Of course not! Everyone does it a little different. Again, just buy the stupid spark plugs your manufacturer suggests and save yourself the headache. Now, for all of you average Joes and zip tie mechanics out there, always make sure you check your diameter, the amount of threads you have, and the length of your plug. The last thing you want to do is replace your whole cylinder head because the plug didn't fit and you had an extra hammer lying around. The importance of this is because the spark plug has a nice little seal here where it sits on the head. This helps keep all the compression in your cylinder. Also, if you were to drive the wrong size plug into the head, your electrode might be in the wrong position. If the electrode is too far in, you can risk damaging your pistons because your piston will actually strike the spark plug. If it's not deep enough because it's too short, your fuel won't burn correctly. When your fuel doesn't burn correctly, it will lead to excess carbon buildup. Excess carbon buildup in the long haul can lead to premature ignition and a lot of performance issues. The last two things I want to cover today are spark plug gap and correct torque. Now, I'm sure you've heard your buddies talk about spark plug gap and wondered what the big deal is about it. So the gap is a little airspace here in between your electrode and your ground electrode. The big reason why this is important is because the more or less air you have here, the more or less spark you're going to have. So the obvious question here is, why don't we crank that puppy all the way open and get the biggest, baddest spark possible, Big Jim? Well there, guy, that's because a bigger gap requires more electricity, which creates more heat, which makes more wear and tear. When you go build your little hot rod engine, you can set the spark plug gap to whatever you want there, buddy. Listen to the engineers and gap your spark plugs accordingly with the correct gapping tool. Make sure you're not breaking the center electrode, but you move the ground. When you go to torque your spark plugs, do not go and grab the biggest, baddest breaker bar in the place and give her the beans so she cross threads in there. You could ruin the seal of your plug, put the damn thing in too deep, make it impossible to replace the plugs in the future, and run the high probability of having to replace a whole cylinder head. The nerds make torque specs. Use them. So that's a very basic introduction to spark plugs. I hope you enjoyed the video and you learned a little something along the way. If there's anything you would like me to cover in the future, just let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and we hope to see you soon. Always remember, keep it on tune.